aware of the location of opposition leader Machado, and have you been in contact with her?
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Mr. President,
Do you have any hesitations about Machado?
Mr. President, on Monday.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect.
Trump just said the quiet part out loud, and no, not about wanting Venezuelan oil, which he also said. He delivered another truth that just slipped out, exposing a shared fiction with the simple statement that the Venezuelan opposition leader lacks support. That's the first time our officials have said that.
Proper transition can take place.
He revealed what our past leaders, other Western governments, and corporate media has been complicit in hiding the whole time. Most of the Western press didn't cover Trump's comment, or if it did, it was briefly tucked away. But Trump just let it slip. He said that opposition leader Maria Corina Machado doesn't have the support. That was a very telling moment, drowned out by Maduro's kidnapping and the attack of another nation. First, consider the media narrative. For the last 2 years, they've claimed that the Maduro has no support, that the opposition is widely approved of, and that they won the last election with a 70% mandate. If she didn't have the support, as stated by the president, to whom she dedicated the Nobel Peace Prize to, then what's the truth? To find out, I went to speak with journalist who was on the ground, a senior staff writer at MintPress News.
So I was in Venezuela for the July elections, July 2024. I was one of more than 900 international observers from around 100 countries. I spent days looking at the build-up to the election and visiting about 5 election sites in and around Caracas on that day. And what I saw overwhelmingly was a system of complete normalcy. The words that people kept coming up with were tranquilo, which is calm, and even sometimes people said verging on boring. And yeah, I was able to talk to the heads of election monitoring organizations, people who were controlling the voting centers, some of whom were openly oppositionistas, who were very happy to tell me what they thought about Maduro and where the country was going. Frankly, what I saw was a country that was very much committed and very much bought into the idea of electoral processes. Even the people who I spoke to who were, and there were many of them who were against Maduro, seemed pretty confident in the electoral system itself. And that electoral system really is vastly superior to the ones we have in the West. In order to vote in Venezuela, you need your ID card and you need to go to the correct voting center where your name is checked off and the picture on your ID card is matched against your own face. At which point you also have to give them your fingerprint scan as well. So the fingerprint has to match the one that's on the record. You then go and vote on an electronic voting machine. The voting machine spits out a paper ballot. You check the paper ballot and then you have to put the paper ballot in a voting box. At which point you also have to sign your name afterwards to say that you have voted. So there are multiple fail-safes along the line to prevent any sort of voter fraud. Those paper ballots are counted up and then checked against the electronic system. If there's even a discrepancy of one vote anywhere in the system, the entire thing grinds to a halt and all hell breaks loose. The paper ballots are counted in front of representatives from members of all parties who want to be there. The whole system is very strong and pretty much foolproof, which is why President Jimmy Carter in 2012 said that Venezuela has the best electoral system in the entire world.
In my research, I interviewed a lot of opposition people in Venezuela. I found out most opposition leaders who opposed the government but also deeply hated Machado. Why do you think that is?
One of the things that's most blatant about this is when they talk about the one opposition party in Venezuela. In reality, there were more than 10 people standing for president in July 2024. All of them but one were opposition candidates, ranging from more moderate centrist positions to very far-right positions like Edmundo Gonzalez, who was the poster child for Maria Corina Machado, the stand-in for her, as she was not allowed to stand because she actually called for an invasion of Venezuela when she was at the Organization of American States in Panama. And so That's really one of the things a lot of people don't know about Venezuela, that there are more moderate forces in the country who back trying to depose Maduro through the ballot box, and the more radical ones, which frankly are the ones that are being supported by the United States government to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars annually, they're the ones that want to depose him through violence, through coups. People who support individuals like Juan Guaido, who in 2019 and 2020 launched this audacious campaign to become the president of Venezuela, despite more than 80% of the country not even knowing who he was, seeing as he was just a lowly delegate from a rather marginalized far-right party, which received 4% of the vote.
Venezuela's most prominent opposition leader, Juan Guaido, is in Miami, the 39-year-old who was officially recognized.
Yet, because he had this institutional support of the John Boltons and the Donald Trumps.
Joining us in the gallery is the true and legitimate president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido. Mr. President, please take this message back to your family.
When we were talking about what is capable, what you need to do to be able to plan a coup, and you cited your expertise having planned coups.
I'm not going to get into the specifics, but
successful coups?
Well, I wrote about Venezuela in the book, and it turned out not to be successful.
He was given enormous credence all over the world as the rightful president of Venezuela, the last democratic institution in the country that was standing. And so, of course, we had to back Guaido. The problem is that he had very little support inside Venezuela, and so when he called on the army to rebel, they shrugged their shoulders and said no. And when he told everybody to get out into the streets, you know, maybe on the first day he could summon a few thousand people, but they weren't showing up day after day because they simply didn't believe in him, partially because of his own serious shortcomings as a person and a politician, and also because he simply wasn't that popular in Venezuela, and neither is regime change, because they know what's going to happen. Venezuelan people have suffered under a decade of crippling sanctions. These sanctions have led to shortages of goods, declining of living standards, difficulties getting key products in, medicines, etc. And they've caused serious economic dislocation in the country. And that has been supported day after day vocally by the most radical sectors of the opposition, but not, as I will emphasize again, by the more moderate opposition forces who reject these sanctions and want Venezuela to have a more normal relationship with the United States, because they believe that they can actually overturn Maduro with a more centrist message. But those people are completely marginalized in the Western press and by Western governments, to the point where I think almost anyone who doesn't actually have like a master's degree or a PhD on Venezuela will even know they exist. And that's by default, that's by definition, you know, because ultimately media in this country really want the more radical sectors to win over the country, because they know that those people are going to be the easiest to control once in power, and they are going to hand over Venezuela's enormous natural resources to Western corporations for exploitation.
Forget about Saudi Arabia. Forget about the Saudis. I mean, we have more oil. I mean, infinite potential. And we're going to open markets. We're going to kick off the government from the oil sector. We are going to privatize all our industries. Venezuela has huge resources: oil, gas, minerals, land, technology. And as you said before, we have a strategic location, hours from the United States. So we're going to do this right. We know what we have to do. And American companies are in, super strategic position to invest. This country, Venezuela, is going to be the brightest opportunity for investment of American companies, of good people that are going to make a lot of money.
You were relying on your knowledge about Venezuela from our media because, of course, most people don't know anything about Venezuela. They're not going to go there. And so their entire view of the country, or any other country in the global south for that matter, comes mediated through a handful of gigantic corporations who can frame systems, issues, and news in whichever way they want, because we don't have the background reservoir of knowledge necessary to really critique what we're seeing.
Stood up to the ruling party and fought for fair elections. Yesterday, the committee recognized her for keeping the flame of democracy burning amid a growing darkness. It's a darkness that has forced her into hiding.
The reason they do that, of course, is that the media is not a check on power. The media is not a neutral arbiter of truth and lies. The media is power itself. And the biggest corporate sources, the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, the BBC, these are representatives of the global elite. They are mouthpieces for power. They are not scrutinizing power, they are power themselves. And they have class interests involved when it comes to Venezuela, the country with the largest proven oil reserves in the world. They want that money and the profits to be flowing to banks in Washington, London, and Paris. And that is really what we saw in Venezuela, as we've seen in so many other countries, that when the going gets tough, the media jettison any idea of truth and facts and fairness and just go to straight power concepts, instructing their readers and their viewers what has to be done and why it must be done.
And they look to the past, to the days when American companies like Standard Oil worked in Venezuela.
With the Americans, the industry worked before.
So you want the Americans to come back?
Of course. They have to come here so that they can change PDVSA.
Oh my God, I want them to enter with planes and with all their equipment, with F-16s, with drones, with everything. I want them to enter in force so they can clean everything up and PDVSA can be reborn.
You're saying you wouldn't mind that they start a war here?
I don't care, because we're already at war.
This PBS segment exists to sell a single dangerous fantasy that Americans would be greeted as liberators. It uses the testimony of a couple of workers to falsely imply mass support. A familiar propaganda tactic recycled directly from the run-up to the war in Iraq.
I don't know how long they'll hang out. It doesn't take a large number of people to cause difficulties in house-to-house fighting. We've just seen that in southern Iraq. But there's no doubt in my mind that we will prevail, and there's no doubt in my mind once these people are gone, we will be welcomed as liberators, that we will be welcomed as liberators.
So on July 28th, when polls closed, Nicolas Maduro was declared the winner with over 51% of the vote. His closest challenger, one of the many opposition candidates, Edmundo Gonzalez, was at least 8 points behind, I believe. He was on 44% of the vote. And so Chavistas went onto the streets to celebrate. But even as that was happening, Edmundo Gonzalez was crying fraud, telling his supporters that he and by extension Machado had actually gained a 40-point victory, and he said that they would present information on this later. And he told his supporters to vent their anger on the streets. And so for the next few days across Venezuela, we saw huge amounts of violence on the streets, with cars being blown up, government buildings and also schools being attacked, and the people inside being terrorized. I myself know that a lot of a whole bus of foreign delegates, including diplomats, were stopped on the highway by armed opposition members and held at gunpoint for a while, to the point where they had to turn the bus back and they all missed their flights. So this democratic-loving opposition, this was the sort of thing that was going on in late July and early August. Machado released a whole website showing what she said was evidence of this fraud. But I happen to know, because I spoke to opposition activists on the ground who showed me on their phones on election night what this meant. Her data was based upon WhatsApp messages from people all around the country texting her the vote in a giant WhatsApp group saying, you know, La Guaira, 7,000 votes for Gonzalez, 20 for Maduro. The sorts of numbers that I was seeing were ludicrous, to the point of where they were saying Gonzalez would pick up 90+% of the vote and Maduro would pick up less than 5%. I mean, anyone looking at the pictures of the enormous rallies that Maduro was holding across the country, especially in Caracas, where I believe the official figure was more than 2 million people attended his final rally. The idea that he could have picked up only 5% of the vote seems utterly ridiculous. And indeed, the metadata proved from the photos that Maria Corina Machado supplied that virtually all of these things were incorrect and they had been faked in a very blatant way.
You know what struck me, Alan, was the scale. Maduro's rallies were massive compared to the opposition's. The media relentlessly demanded Maduro to show the actas, but that demand itself was curious. Why was that the make or break issue when presenting actas has never been a standard requirement for victory in Venezuela, even during the Fourth Republic before Chavez?
Understood the obsession with the actas in that sense, because virtually every other country in the world doesn't have the system, so I don't know why they're such a stickler for certain parts of Venezuelan democracy and not others. I don't know.
That's a key point. Major discrepancies in Ecuador and Honduras didn't trigger calls from actas from the media. So why Venezuela? It was always a strange request, as actas aren't the ultimate proof. When Venezuelan Supreme Court and the CNE authorities asked for evidence, Machado's party was notably absent, while all the other opposition parties and Maduro's party went to present it. Ahead of the Maduro inauguration, the prevalent media narrative was that Edmundo and Maria Corina Machado were poised to take power.
En la que asegura estará en Caracas para jurar como presidente constitucional.
Por cualquier medio que sea, voy a estar allá.
On the inauguration eve, the opposition called supporters into the streets to prevent Maduro from being sworn in. The rally that followed? Drone footage showed a turnout of only a few couple thousand. A muted reality highlighted by the fact that every network seemed to be broadcasting the same limited on-the-ground shots of Maria Corina Machado. And now that Trump has been able to remove Maduro, they no longer needed the original plan of installing a leader.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country.
She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country.
Trump blew the cover off the Venezuelan narrative. His claim that Maria Corina Machado lacked support wasn't a gaffe. It was truth-telling. The entire story of popular opposition was a myth, a disposable tool in a longer game. The real objective was never democracy, it was always oil and who controls it. The media's silence proves their role, to protect the operation and not question it. Alan, where can I find your work?
Sure, my name's Alan MacLeod. You can find my work at mintpressnews.com, and you can also find me on all the social media platforms, especially Twitter at Alan R. MacLeod or Instagram at alan.r.macleod.